Hello, DawgNation. I am Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And you already know. You already know what it's going to be like today. You already know what we're here to talk about. You lived through it. Many of you were there. I think you would agree with me that if you were there, most unforgettable night in the history of that stadium, and that's a stadium that's obviously existed for darn near a century, highest ranked matchup ever. And the Georgia crowd, the Georgia experience has never been more intense as Georgia literally ran Tennessee out of the state on Saturday. And it was great to see. And we're going to talk about every angle of it. It's going to take us more than one day to do it, but we're going to do our part to do as much of it as we can today. And yeah, for those of you who were there and for those of you who were part of it, you can take a bow on all of this. You contributed and you made it happen. And we learned a lot about Georgia. We learned a lot about what matters still in college football. And we're going to kind of cover it all here as Dogs are standing taller right now than I think they have maybe at any point. Reigning national champs, the unquestioned number one, and every single person who said anything negative about this team going into Saturday, and there were a lot of people, and we keep a lot of receipts around here, every single one of them, they are required now to apologize. The entire show on Tuesday night when the ESPN does their college football playoff rankings, the entire broadcast, the CFP ranking, should be nothing but an apology to Georgia. We are sorry we ever doubted you. You are exactly what you were a year ago. You're that same kind of team right now, the kind of team that teams like Tennessee just don't come into Athens and have any chance of beating. So it feels great to be a dog here today. It feels great to say go for 2 and 22. So a lot of 2 fingers in the air in Athens there on Saturday. A lot of folks using that hashtag on social media, which makes me very, very happy. Georgia fans can be hard to deal with here this week. There is no doubt about that, as the Dogs have a chance to clinch the division and own the East once again with a win Saturday at Mississippi State. We'll eventually get there. But first, a lot to break down on a night not to be forgotten between the hedges in honor of the legendary coach and athletic director Vince Dooley, the legendary former player Charlie Trippi. There was so much emotion, just absolutely just coursing through every aspect of what was happening in Athens on Saturday. It was obvious early Saturday morning, was obvious days before the game, and it all came to an unbelievable culmination. So let's get going on it. We'll talk to John Stinchcomb, who was there on Saturday there as well. Got kind of cool honor at one point in time during the game, and we'll just see where it all goes. We're glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, and presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Folks have been doing this show for a long time around here. You know that. And I don't know that there has ever been a more satisfying day to be on the air than there is right now. We are in such a great mood. And we want to look back at every aspect of this Georgia-Tennessee game. It's going to take us more than one day to do it probably. But I think that you've got to start off by saying this. And we'll get to what Kirby Smart said about the atmosphere in a moment. But this was the most intense atmosphere for football I have ever seen. And you're going to make some comparisons to certain things. And I think it has to be understood what made Saturday so different from, like, say, 2019 Notre Dame, the first time that the Irish came here to Athens and the light show kind of showing off those LED lights for the first time or anything like that. In fact, let me just kind of use the Notre Dame game as a comparison here for a moment. When that game took place in September of 2019, that was a little bit of a festival. Georgia had just been to South Bend in 2017. Notre Dame fans were very kind to UGA, welcomed with open arms. There were like probably 40, 50,000 Georgia fans in South Bend for that game, and they were actually very well received by the Fighting Irish folks. And so I think there was a temptation when they came here in September of 2019 just want to reciprocate that. And plus, everybody was kind of excited about this sort of newfangled LED light stuff. That the game against Notre Dame in 2019, it just felt a little bit like kind of a festival, sort of a celebration of college football. Georgia and Notre Dame aren't historic rivals necessarily. Notre Dame obviously has a lot of attention, so a lot of people don't like them because of the attention they receive. But there wasn't a lot of, like, tenacious rivalry stuff going on with UGA. And plus, at the time, I'm not really quite so sure at the beginning of that season, we knew how good we thought Georgia was, completely different. on Saturday, this wasn't just a festive college football atmosphere. This wasn't just a loud crowd. Folks, if you were there, you would acknowledge me on this. This was an edgy crowd. This was a very edgy day. This was a crowd that was angry, and you could really feel it. And they channeled it in such a positive way towards making an impact on this game. They went out there and they changed the game. And when you think about kind of where Georgia is at this point in the season, with a lot of work still left to be done along the way to go for 2-22, but when you think about where Georgia is at this point in the season, I think that you have to really kind of get to this part of and really fully understand the fact that right now Georgia is vanquishing critics. And for some reason, going into a game like this, Georgia heard way more criticism. We talked about it, on Friday's show and really a little bit every day last week. It seems like we were kind of dragging out some doofus somewhere who was like, Georgia can't stop Tennessee, or Georgia can't score any points, or Georgia doesn't have, any kind of home field advantage. How many times we sort of drag all this out last week that it just seemed like that Georgia was dealing with sort of an unreasonable level of skepticism for a team that had won the national championship the prior year, was undefeated, was a point spread favorite in the game, but somehow it became kind of fun to make Georgia a little bit of a punching bag going into a game like this. And the team and the fans had enough. They weren't going to tolerate a second longer. And if you were there on Saturday, you felt the edge that existed around the game. And, a lot of this started on Saturday morning there, too, with, after everything you'd heard about anonymous coaches quoted by ESPN, washed up has-been former Tennessee quarterbacks, or, Jordan Rodgers, going on some, show somewhere. It also continued kind of on that game day set. Game day in Athens, there at the Myers Quad, and yet all the folks who were there, voices on the show, it was like a one-way street of folks picking Tennessee. Thankfully, Luke Bryan was there to kind of correct the record and all this, but prior to that, a whole bunch of folks doing nothing but picking Tennessee. In fact, let me let you hear a little bit of that from ESPN on Saturday. This is the game day crowd.
Smokey is right here next to me. So for this dog fight, I'm going with Smokey and the Tennessee Volunteers. What? I'm picking Tennessee. All over. Good old Rocky Top. Listen, we're going to step on their faces. All right. We're going to crush their dreams. Okay. With a hobnail boot.
I mean, thank goodness for Luke Bryan right there. How much of an idiot does Pat McAfee and Kirk Herbstreit, who we typically kind of like, or Desmond Howard, how much of idiots do they look like, falling all over themselves to pick Tennessee in a game like that? And I'm telling you, that created an edge on Saturday. The team played with the edge. The fans brought their level of edge. There was some nastiness to this day on Saturday. This wasn't just, Athens is this quaint college town, and boy, it loves college football. There was something else going on there on Saturday. And, after the game, Keely Ringo kind of acknowledged that whether it be Tuesday night with the way the selection committee handled its business, or all the stuff throughout the week, that this was a Georgia team that, kind of wanted to show some teeth a little bit on Saturday. I thought that Keely said it very well after the game. Obviously had a huge pick during the game, penchant for big plays and big moments, obviously. But after the game, I thought Keely Ringo did a pretty good job of kind of acknowledging that Georgia was not in a good mood going into Saturday's game. Here's Keely.
Honestly, as a player, I would say it was a little bit upsetting, but I feel like going out there, that didn't have anything to do with it. I feel like being able to just prove different people wrong. We've seen a lot of different articles and stuff like that. We try to stay away from the media and just continue to work on our preparation and just be able to execute. And I feel like the rest will take care of itself.
If you're watching a video, you see a great photo of Kirby Smart leaping into the air there. And I love those words from Keely Ringo. And the question you ask is, hey, where does Georgia go for its apology now? Who's going to step up and say, hey, I'm sorry, I got it wrong? Now, Eric Ainge, to his credit, I guess kind of already has, but frankly, nobody really cares what he thinks one way or another. But how about some of these other prominent voices? How about this anonymous coach who was quoted by ESPN that said Georgia's going to give up 50 points? 50 points, he said, to Tennessee. Is he going to come out of the woodworks and anonymously apologize now? Sorry, I'm, got this wrong. There's a reason why I'm acting as a source for a story as opposed to coaching a game like this. Is he going to step up and apologize? Is Jordan Rodgers going to step up and apologize now? Are all the people who've said what they've said, are they going to step up and apologize now? Because that's what Georgia's owed. That's all Tuesday night should be. when the college football playoff selection committee does its show again, the entire thing should be, hey, Georgia, we're sorry we even talked about anybody else, because we'll get there in a minute. But, Clemson loses. Alabama loses. Ohio State, who's apparently God's gift to football, struggling to beat Notre Dame. Or I should say Northwestern. Yeah, it's windy or whatever, but nonetheless. It's not just that Georgia won on Saturday, but it did so in such a way that I think right now the spotlight is sort of squarely on it in a way that it doesn't deserve to be on anybody else. And, yeah, there ought to be some apologies issued for the way that Georgia played. And that part of today isn't just being, happy that your team played well. Part of this is some of that leftover, lingering response to the negativity that was way too robust and way too prominent and prolific going into last week. Georgia never deserved to hear all of the negativity that heard last week. But if it helped contribute to the victory, I guess for some fans, they may be happy with that. And sort of speaking of the fans, once again, Kirby Smart was, customarily, as he does, kind of giving credit to them off the top of his post-game press conference about the role in which they played in making this happen. This is one of the things that makes college football special, is you do have those days, those nights in which it seems like the team is feeding off the crowd is feeding off the team, and you just kind of, everybody sort of working together as one, and it felt like all of DawgNation was kind of just moving in the same direction there on Saturday. It was a sight to behold, and Kirby did a great job of shouting out just how impactful those fans were. This is Kirby from the post-game press conference there on Saturday.
What an incredible environment. I just got a text from my wife. I've never seen our fans not leave the stadium like that, even when it rained. Claude may have mentioned that at the start of the second half, there wasn't an empty seat in the house other than the ones they purchased. And our fans were elite today. We asked them to be. They responded. And they get the second place vote because the players on this team bought in. And they understood the plan. They executed the plan. They played extremely physical. They played without ego. And they played complementary football, which is always important. Really proud of the way our guys played.
So I want to get to a lot of what Kirby Smart said there, but let me just say one more thing on the fans. And once again, if you're watching a video, you see some of the images from the game on Saturday. Y'all, it's obvious that I'm a Georgia partisan here. I want Georgia to do well. I want Georgia to win the game. And, we really spent a lot of time last week kind of pushing, a big atmosphere created by fans. And I told you last week that I was concerned, well, if it rained, in fact, we had our good friend Ella Dorsey on from Atlanta News First on Friday for R.S. Andrews Cool Down. I told Ella, who's obviously a meteorologist, I said, listen, my concern here is not how the rain impacts the game. I think the team itself will be fine, but I'm worried about how the rain will impact the fans. Will it dampen the mood in the stadium? And when that rain came, I got really worried about that. Are these fans going to put on their rain gear? Are they going to sit there and shiver? Are they going to sit on their hands? Y'all, it got louder. It got louder, and that's what Kirby's referencing when he said nobody left. What he means is that nobody went running for the undercover. Nobody went to the concourse. Nobody left the stadium because all of a sudden it was raining. It starts to get a little colder when it gets rainy. It was, I'm sure, very uncomfortable, and nobody left at all. And if anything, they were turning up their noise level to a higher gear. Can you imagine how miserable it must be if you're the Tennessee offense and at that point in time hadn't scored a touchdown all day long? The Georgia defense is frothing at the mouth. The Georgia fans are breathing down your neck. It's raining. Like, do you know how miserable it was to be wearing orange on Saturday? I'm talking about absolutely unmercifully miserable. And the Georgia fans who made it even more so once the rain started, I'll never forget that. There was that third quarter moment where I think it's third quarter, certainly second half, where it's a big third down play, and the crowd is like so loud that, it's really like piercing my ears. It's so loud. And it leads to the Javon Bullard sack, and I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it kept getting louder and louder and louder. I just couldn't believe it. But as Kirby said, hey, for all the credit the fans get, the players themselves, they get top-shelf billing here, and they do get top-shelf credit. And Smart uses three phrases there that I think are really important. It's going to take me more than a day to unpack all of this. But he talks about the physicality of this. And, y'all, it still matters. It still matters. For everything everybody wants to seem to do to take the physical part out of the game. And I'm not talking about player safety. Obviously, we're very respectful of player safety. But there is clearly an emphasis on the more finesse version of the sport right now. And Kirby's kind of zigging when everybody else is zagging. It's like the old Warren Buffett line. greedy when people are panicked and panicked when people are greedy. As more and more folks seem to be trying to figure out a way to make football less physical, Georgia wins games like this by just being tougher than their team they're playing. Do you know how much it must be awful to play against this Georgia team because they want to strike you? They want to do that. They want to strike, blockers, on defense. The offensive line wants to kind of find somebody to strike and, make that extra opportunity for 1 or 2 extra yards. Do you know how awful that must be to play against Georgia, knowing how much they embrace the physical part of this and the fact that Georgia does play without ego in a time in which, you don't have to look very far to the west here to see a team that I think has kind of come apart at the seams. I'm talking about Alabama here because of a lot of different egos and maybe a lot of people playing for themselves more so than playing for the team. And the bond that used to seem to exist there that contributed to championships, for whatever reason, that's kind of come unraveled. And maybe one day at Georgia the same thing will happen. The price of success is it becomes harder to stay at the top. But for now, enjoy this moment and enjoy what Georgia looks like because it looks a lot like it did a year ago. We see all the time, #go-for-2 in 22. What that means is it's playing a brand of football that it's a replica of the brand of football that allowed Georgia to win a national championship last season where guys play for each other. They play with each other. They genuinely enjoy doing that. It's a thing of beauty to watch there on Saturday as what worked for Georgia a season ago was once again proved to still be working here right now. And then Kirby gets into the idea of complementary football and what that's all about. And I thought he was asked a really good question about, what that means to him and what maybe people think about Georgia because it kind of leans in that direction. And I thought Kirby gave a great answer to that too. I'm going to get to that here coming up in a moment. But just sort of sum up all of this. What a day it was to be in Athens. It was a historic game. Never have we seen 2 teams ranked this high playing on this field. And never have we seen Georgia fans make themselves more a part of the final outcome than they did. And never have we seen a Georgia team firing on all cylinders the way that it was. Or maybe we shouldn't say never have we seen that. We have recently seen that. This felt like a continuation of the national championship story, a national championship level program that has taken that pursuit into a new year. Go for 2 in 22. It is more real than ever. That is the journey that Georgia can be on, and Saturday may have only been another step in that direction. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella, Window and Door of Georgia. We're happy to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We start at 9:45 at DawgNation.com and on the DawgNation app. We are so happy to have you with us. And a big thanks to our friends at Pella, Window and Door of Georgia for making it all possible. Georgia obviously enjoyed a great home field advantage on Saturday, and you can give yourself a big advantage at your home, too, when it comes to Pella windows and doors. Because right now, my house last couple of days has been really warm on the outside, which means we've got the air conditioning turned back on again. And AC is obviously expensive, and when you got that air conditioning kind of running through the house, you don't want it, escaping out poorly fitted windows and doors or just kind of a sort of a faulty product that doesn't kind of help keep your house kind of sealed and comfortable the way it's supposed to be. That's what Pella windows and doors are all about. You'll love the product. In fact, homeowners here in the Atlanta area, in survey after survey, year after year, have kind of recognized Pella Window and Door of Georgia for exactly what it is, the true brand leader, viewed to be the best. All kinds of knowing homeowners here in our area will tell you exactly that, and you can find out more about this yourself. You can have a conversation, no pressure, with one of the Pella experts who can talk to you about all the installation options, the entire product line, or if you want to stop by and see for yourself at that Experience Center right there in Duluth, you can put your hands and feel what makes a Pella window and door so much better. You can also get great savings now as well because it's not just a great product. It comes at a great offer there as well because between now and November 30th, you can get payments as low as $199 a month or $200 off windows, $400 off doors. Great savings there as well from our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. So stop by and see them at the Experience Center in Duluth. Or give them a call, 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496. Or visit them online, pellaofga.com/DawgNation. pellaofga.com/DawgNation. And, of course, make sure you tell them that BA from DawgNation Daily said they would take good care of you because I know that they will. So reach out to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia today. It is John Stinchcomb coming up in a moment. We'll talk a lot of stuff about John. John was there on Saturday. I am very curious to hear his perspective on all of this. Before that, though, I want to go around the doghouse. And Around the Doghouse today is assisted by our friends at AAA. Now, let me ask a fair question. And I think I'm going to do a little bit of this a few more times later on in the week, kind of addressing this for a moment. So we talked about what I would view as kind of an unfair level of criticism for Georgia coming into a game like this. And I think it's fair to wonder, well, if that was true, if Georgia was unfairly criticized, incorrectly maligned, if folks should have known better and sort of did it anyway, I think it's fair to ask the question, well, what's the motivation for that? Because it is very easy to sort of fall in the fan trap of saying, well, the media just hates my team. The media is out to get my team. Trust me when I tell you, every fan base everywhere at times sort of feels like the media, in air quotes, is out to get their team. And we don't want to kind of fall in the trap of being excessively cliche, things like that. I do think it's legitimate that Georgia fans were in a bad mood on Saturday. I think they had justifiable reason to be in a bad mood. But at the same time, it's too simplistic to say, well, the media just hates my team, because everybody at times sort of feels like the media hates their team. We fully acknowledge that. So I think it's fair to ask, well, if Georgia was getting an unfair level of criticism coming into this game, what is the genesis of all that? Why is that the case? I think there are potentially a few reasons. We may touch on some of these as the week goes on. But here's kind of what it comes down to, is that people reject complexity and they embrace simplicity. And one of the ways in which you see football kind of marketed right now is it's like, before the big game, it's like you got one side of the graphic with one phase and another side of the graphic with another phase. And typically speaking, the easiest way to sort of sell college football right now is, hey, it's Bryce Young and the Alabama Crimson Tide. It's C.J. Stroud and the Ohio State Buckeyes. That is a very simple marketing message, and it's very easy for people to understand, and it's very easy to kind of fall in line with that. That when you sell the sport as quarterbacks throwing to wide receivers, really, really simple, well, all of a sudden now I don't have to memorize a bunch of names on defense. I don't have to memorize a bunch of offensive linemen. I don't have to learn a lot more about anything else, just than the superstar quarterback and sort of the superstar wide receiver, and that's sort of all you have to know. But at Georgia, the story is way more complicated than that. If I were to ask you, let's say that you were in charge of CBS's graphics department. You're selling Georgia versus Tennessee. On the Tennessee side, it's very simple to say, well, the one player I'm going to put on that graphic is Hendon Hooker. Or if it's not Hendon Hooker, maybe it's Jalen Hyatt, but it's one of the two. It's either quarterback or star receiver, probably quarterback, and it's very easy to sell Tennessee football that way. Hey, come watch Hendon Hooker and the Tennessee Vols. What one face are you putting on the Georgia side? If I gave you 1 second to sell Georgia football, why you should tune in and watch this team play, what one face are you putting there? You couldn't just pick one face. In fact, for our player of the game on Saturday, I think we picked the entire Georgia defense. It's like, do you go with secondary? Do you give it to Keely Ringo? Do you give it to Javon Bullard? Do you give it to Kamari Laster? Do you give it to Jalen Carter? It's like, once again, this defense, just like it was a year ago, it's just like everybody doing everything all at once at the same time. And you had the number one overall pick on last year's defense. You had the Bednarik Award winner on last year's defense. You had the Butkus Award winner on last year's defense. You had 5 first-round picks in total. But never at any point in time did one of those guys stand taller than the rest. It really was just a team effort. It was a bunch of guys who were sort of equals, compared to each other, even though they all had kind of individual accolades. And this Georgia team this year is kind of the same way. It's an offense that helps the defense. It's a defense that helps the offense. That is Georgia's recipe for success, but it is not as sexy as a marketing message as Bryce Young and the Alabama Crimson Tide, or Hendon Hooker and the Tennessee Vols, or C.J. Stroud and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Superstar player propelling a team. Georgia's a team of stars. Georgia's a team of excellent players, and both sides of the ball kind of help each other. It's complementary football. That might seem a little boring to some people. And Kirby Smart was asked on Saturday, hey, do you feel like this game kind of validates your version of complementary football? It's not as sexy as the way in which other teams are selling themselves right now, but do you think this kind of validates your team? And I thought that Kirby Smart gave a good answer to what I think is, frankly, a very fair question. Here is Kirby after the game on Saturday.
I don't think we have to validate complementary football. We've been playing complementary football around here for a long time. I just think that's the way you should play football. We talked all week about hunting with a purpose. They gained confidence as the week went on to the plan, and they stuck to the plan, and they executed well.
So here's why I think that people think that Kirby has to validate complementary football. Offense helping defense, defense helping offense, no one person standing taller than the rest of the team. It's because no matter how often it works, people keep assuming it won't work. Georgia didn't have enough, what was it Jordan Rodgers said? Didn't have enough playmakers. Georgia didn't have enough talent. Georgia doesn't have enough this, enough that. And, defense, going to give up 50 points because there's not enough of something on this team. Somehow, some way, the complementary brand of football that Georgia plays, where everything seems equal to the other, no matter how often that keeps working, against Tennessee now, against Alabama a year ago, Michigan a year ago, any other big game you kind of want to cite here over the course of the last year and a half, no matter how often it keeps working, there seems to be a group of people who are going to step up and say it's not going to work in the future because that's just not the way the rest of the sport is marketing itself right now. But if you notice this, the rest of the sport is looking up at Georgia, and that brand of complementary football that's worked in the past, it may keep on working in the future there as well. And that is Around the Doghouse, and it's presented today by our friends at AAA. And, of course, I'm always thankful to have that AAA membership card in my pocket because I'm traveling a lot. High school football on Friday, heading to Athens this past Saturday, going to Starkville this upcoming Saturday. When I'm traveling around like that, it's good to have AAA with me where I go. But let's face it, that's not the only thing AAA can do for you. And I want you to know about the other services they provide, including being a tremendous resource when it comes to your auto insurance there as well. Because with AAA, you can expect something more. They're known for that. But you might also pay something less. In fact, you can reach out right now and get a no-obligation quote to find out how AAA auto insurance might be a great option for you. And you might qualify for some of these great savings opportunities, like the membership discount, easy for me to say, the paperless discount, the pay-in-full discount, the multiple car savings, and so much more. There's so many different ways you can save on your auto insurance with AAA. So reach out and have a consultation and find out how one of those might be right for you. Give them a call, 833-718-2075. That's 833-718-2075. Reach out to our friends at AAA today. All right, so a lot going on here, a lot of bases to cover as relates to Georgia on Saturday. So what better way to do that right now than when a former All-American who was on hand on Saturday got a terrific honor during the game? What did it feel like to be on that sideline for a portion of the game with that crowd the way that it was? Let's hear about it all right now. John Stinchcomb here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So there's a lot to talk to John Stinchcomb about. We're going to do our best to cover all of those bases. But, John, I do want to just mention this before we kind of get into this. You and some of your teammates on that 2002 Georgia team were honored on Saturday. I've seen them do this for some, milestone-type teams before, milestone-type players before. The trophies they give out for that, for people who may have been in the stadium and saw this, they're huge. Like, this is a gigantic trophy. I mean, how cool is that to get that? Is it as heavy as it looks? To give out a trophy like that to every single member of the 2002 team that was, on the field there at that point in time, that seems like a really nice thing. I mean, what a cool thing to get, John. What was that like?
Oh, it's enormous. First of all, and it's for the All-SEC team from 2002, which, you look at all the guys that were recognized, and you think, man, we had quite a team. And you think back, and we really did. It was a special year for us. But those trophies are enormous, and a good 45, 50 pounds. So, where to put it, I think that's always the biggest question when you get something like that. I'm going to set it in the middle of our dining room table so my family likes to stare at that big old joker. I mean, man, what do you do with it? It was quite an honor, and what an incredible Saturday to be a part of the festivities. Huge win for Georgia, and just awesome to be out there and reconnect with guys that I hadn't seen. Kevin Breedlove, he's living in Costa Rica now.
How about that?
Just to reconnect with some guys and relive some old memories was awesome before the game, and then to be a part, and at least on that sideline for a part of that, and watch Stetson scamper into the end zone was something really special and a memory that'll last a long time for all of us.
Yeah, I'm curious, and obviously you played in big games, and so you're no stranger to big-time crowd noise, of course, but as you mentioned, you were on the sideline for a portion of that. What did it feel like to be down there? Because, John, the thing that – and I'm not a former player, but I have spent some time on fields during games. The one thing that always kind of, I guess, sticks out to me when I'm on the field in a moment when it's loud – I don't think it's ever been louder than it was on Saturday – is the way in which the noise kind of bounces off the ground, and you can kind of almost feel like the ground shaking a little bit. It's amazing how the surface, the playing surface, becomes the focal point for all that noise, and there's a tangible feeling associated with that. What did it feel like to be down there, in the midst of all that? What did that feel like personally for you?
To a person, and when we're talking about guys that we've all played in big games, it was the loudest we've ever heard Sanford Stadium. It was reverberating off the field, like you say, and you saw it affect Tennessee time and time again. Billy Bennett was out there and said the only memory that came close was playing in Neyland Stadium when they hit that long, I think it was like a screen pass that they took to the house right before the Hobnail Boot series. And that was the loudest moment that he can recall that compared to what continually happened in Sanford Stadium on Saturday. It was remarkable how loud it was. And, there were fans that I talked to Sunday at church that were saying it was almost painful to their ears and reminiscent to my days in New Orleans, which is a dome, and you captured that sound where your ears still ring that next day. It's so loud. And I think it is the best fan performance in Sanford Stadium, bar none. It was very impressive.
John, I totally agree. I want to get to the specifics of the game in a moment, but I want to respond back to something you just said there. A lot of people who do what I do for a living end up going deaf, so I'm very sensitive about my hearing. And I'm telling you right now, when I would get up and go to the bathroom or something like that, when you kind of there was this sort of ringing that was still in your ears when you stepped away from the crowd because of how loud that it was. There's the one great image that's been shared a few times, like a Tennessee fan kind of holding his ears, which is kind of like the image of the day, so to speak. But I mean, this wasn't just loud. It was kind of a piercing loudness, and at times it kept getting louder. And I'm just telling you right now, it had to have been intimidating. A lot of the Tennessee players have said that it was. Josh Heupel acknowledged that it was. It had to be intimidating because it wasn't just yay, go team. There was a nastiness to it. This was a fan base on Saturday that was not in a good mood about some of the things they had heard leading into the game.
Yeah, it was. What's funny is in recent years, I feel like Georgia fans have been known for their decorum on a Saturday. Like, hey, I've talked to other fans who came and as visitors and said, "Oh, they were all nice." I did not get that same impression on Saturday.
No.
Matter of fact, I had a cousin who was there and said it was one of the nastiest experiences that he's had in Sanford Stadium, and I think it was because of all the chatter before the game, not specifically from Tennessee, but from the national media. I should also go back to, I apologize for laughing, BA, when you said a lot of people in your profession end up with some hearing damage because it was very loud, and I shouldn't make light of anyone who suffers the consequences of it. I honestly feel like there were games where it affected my hearing for a couple days, and I think you do that too many times, it's probably not good for you. As a matter of fact, I hope the athletic department is prepared for a couple of class action lawsuits for all that were in attendance, because man, it was loud. That was a loud setting, and I say it a little bit in jest because it certainly affected the game. I've never seen offensive linemen jump off sides before the ref is even behind out from behind the center. It was almost instantaneously, and I realized they play fast ball, but it very much affected the game. Coach Heupel mentioned it a couple of times, and as did other players. But it was a truly remarkable special setting, and to think that came in the middle of a regular season game, I think makes it that much more impressive.
So let's talk about some of the things from the game. I thought defensively it was as Kirby Smart as it gets. I mean, Georgia completely took away the Tennessee run game, and at that point, you kind of make Tennessee more one-dimensional. And, as I kind of mentioned to some of our video audience before the show began today, this is not just a great Georgia game plan. Clearly it was, but you're asking these Georgia players, Javon Bullard and Keely Ringo and Kamari Lassiter and Chris Smith, you're asking them to go out there with no safety net whatsoever and just battle in a one-on-one type situation and just run step for step, and they were equal to that task on Saturday. So same thing for the five guys that were asked to stop the run and take that away from Tennessee. It was a great defensive game plan. Obviously, the results speak to that, but part of what made it so great is these Georgia coaches had enough faith in their guys to say, we think you can do this. We think that you can go out there and, Nick Saban said he thought his team was soft against Tennessee. Georgia clearly was not going to play soft. They may lose, but they weren't going to lose playing soft. And the Georgia defense responded. What did you think about that side of the ball?
I don't think Coach Smart and his staff get enough credit. I want to flash back to 2019 when Georgia wasn't a national championship team and LSU is running up and down the field against teams. And there was a sentiment across the country and included in Georgia Nation. The Bulldog Nation was like, if you don't score 50 points, it's not about defense anymore. It used that old adage of defense wins championship no longer applies. It's become a boat race, if you will, and Georgia has to keep up. And Coach Smart and his staff doubled down on that balanced attack.
Yeah.
We're gonna play hard defense. We're gonna play physical. We're not going pushing all our chips onto the table and say we're just going to play 50-point plus football and race you to the finish line. We're going to stay true to who we've been and who we are, and not ignore the fact that the game has changed. I think we've recognized there's new wrinkles offensively, but certainly didn't sell the house when it comes to playing solid defense. And that's an abandonment from what other folks had raced to of, well, this is just offensive football now. We're playing speedball like it's backyard. And Georgia did not do that. And I think it's paying dividends in spades and why there's a separation. And it's hard for me to even wrap my mind around the parity that people are talking about when you get to the top, because Georgia is head and shoulders above the rest of the class. Now, can they slip up, and is humility, quote-unquote, a week away? Absolutely. There are teams that very much can beat Georgia that you go out there and perform on a Saturday, and, can Georgia lose? The answer is yes. There's not that much separation from the teams on the top, but there isn't a team out there that I feel like if Georgia played a 10-week season against them that they wouldn't win 7 or 8 of them. Not a team that is close week in and week out to the level of football that Georgia can play, and primarily that's because they are so efficient on both sides of the ball. They're not so heavy offensively that they can overcome defensive deficiencies. What was expected of this defense was a huge drop-off as they try to replace these all-stars that left. And by all-stars, guys that were drafted high. Because you and I know, even last year, it was almost, nobody was saying Travon Walker, who goes number one in the draft, is the star of the defense.
That's right.
That didn't really matriculate out until after the season was over. So, again, it's guys playing at a really high level selflessly so that the unit performs exceptionally well, and it doesn't always translate to individual statistics.
I totally agree with all of that. And on the other side of the ball, I thought Stetson Bennett was so electric. The rushing touchdown, and you talk about another kind of moment that stands out, when it appeared for a moment the officiating crew had gotten that wrong and had to go to replay to get it correct. The roar that came after the correct overturn of the call and the fact that, Stet had touched the pylon, like that was one of those single moments from the game that'll stick with me forever. But the rushing touchdown, the throw to Rosemary Jackson, of course, the beautiful bomb to Ladd McConkey, but to have Georgia come out swinging on that, establish the lead, and then kind of like a python eating a possum, just completely strangling and suffocating, Tennessee for the rest of the game. But the way in which they kind of came out offensively, Stetson in particular, how about that side of the ball?
Oh, well, I look forward to putting that on a T-shirt, like a python eating a possum. That's a good one there, B.A. So, it's such an impressive performance because Georgia started off. Their very first series, they turned the ball over at midfield, and you're going, oh, no, this is what can't happen. And who answers the bell but the defense? Holds them to 3 points. And then very quickly, Georgia just marches the ball down the field and ends up with a touchdown. We're in the sidelines going, are they debating whether it was a targeting call? That's what we thought the pause was for, because he very certainly lowers his helmet, and it's helmet-to-helmet contact. And, who knows these days how they call those sensitive, touchy, subjective calls, but it was an electric performance, start to finish, and I think Georgia did exactly what they had planned to do. You come into those games with a game plan, and sometimes you realize pretty quickly that this ain't it, and we have to make some tweaks, and we're going to make some adjustments. But what I felt like happened on Saturday is they came in with a good game plan that the players believed in, and from start to finish believed in it and executed it at such a high level that Tennessee couldn't find an answer to what Georgia was throwing at them, and that's on both sides of the ball. I thought, again, Stetson's the guy that somehow he continues to be underrated in so many people's minds.
Yeah.
But he's more than a game manager. He creates. He's brave enough to make some throws, or decisive enough to where he sees a lane that he takes it. And that touchdown is case in point. But he also made some absolutely gorgeous throws. The Arian Smith throw, the Ladd McConkey throw, that few quarterbacks can do that on a consistent level. As a matter of fact, you look at Hooker on the other side, and there were 3 deep balls where he had a wide receiver behind our defensive backs that he overthrows by 2 or 3 yards that could have been situation changers for Tennessee in that overall game. But I think that it goes to speak to that complete performance. And when you affect the passer up front, which we were able to do and Tennessee was not able to do, it changes so many different dynamics and aspects of the game that led to a resounding Georgia victory over a good Tennessee football team.
Let me do 2 quick things before we let you go. Kirby talks a lot about special teams, and at times I have to admit that when he's kind of going on for several minutes at a time about kick coverage, you sort of wish he'd say something more interesting. As someone who does this for a living, it'd be nice to have a little more exciting quote from time to time. I don't mind telling you that. And yet, you have a day like Saturday where you're like, well, gosh, I guess this stuff really is important, because maybe one of the pivotal moments of the season thus far is the 70-plus yard punt by Brett Thorson, which Nyland Green races down and finds a way to kind of, get, before it gets in the end zone, becomes a touchback and kind of down it inside the 1 there. Well, I guess after it's all said and done, maybe special teams really is really important, because Tennessee completely wilted in the shadow of its own end zone right there. And once again, special teams kind of a big part of that, which is really, once again, John, just a validation of the way that Georgia plays.
Yes, and it came at such a pivotal time. I mean, those minutes in a football game that are heavyweight bouts, I think for teams that are familiar with those territories, they're not as monumental as it can be for other teams that are excited about being in that moment, but they're kind of unfamiliar territory. And for Tennessee, that became a pivotal game-changing moment for them, where I think there was a mentality shift of like, oh, well, this is a big game. Where I hate to point back to games in the past that Georgia's played in, but those Georgia-Alabama brawls that we've seen where, a heavyweight haymaker gets thrown and it lands sometimes, but the game's not over. In this game against Tennessee, I felt like there was a shift that was almost palpable. You could feel that Tennessee was like, oh no, this isn't what we thought it was going to be. And all of a sudden they felt like their back was against the wall and were having to play from that position for the rest of the game, because, that special teams play was huge. I also think that I'm still debating whether or not that was a safety.
Yeah, no doubt.
It was awful close to me.
No doubt.
Well, huge play, and yeah, it's consistency, right? That's the complementary, all 3 phases of the game coming together.
So, just very quick before I let you go, you mentioned that, kind of getting after Hooker in the end zone there. I've been calling for it all season long. Saturday it showed up. How nice was it to see that relentless pass rush finally on display for Georgia after – and I do take it seriously. I heard Daniel Jeremiah talk about that this week, and Jeremiah is a guy that I have a lot of respect for from the NFL Network. Then in the college game, getting harder to get sacks. Kirby Smart's talked about that too. Logistically, when you only have a couple of seconds, it's hard to get there. But boy, on Saturday, Georgia got credited with 6. Could have been 8. Maybe should have been. Some of that kind of stuff is hard to know if the quarterback was running or not. But nonetheless, it was relentless pass rush, and for me, that was the single most satisfying moment of the entire game.
Yeah, it's a piece of the Georgia defense that you're like, ooh, especially losing Nolan Smith. who was so consistent in everything that he did. Even though he wasn't like a stat or a sack guy per se on a national scale, so consistent. How does a defense replace somebody like that? Yet the very first performance after knowing that he's not going to be available for the season, Georgia does what it does, which is relies on that entirety of the unit. And it wasn't just Jalen Carter, who, man, it's always good to have him back. But so it's through pressures and just relentless pass rush from your front four, being able to affect the passer was a huge piece of this football game where Booker was not comfortable. You watched him in the pocket, and you could see that the pass rush affected him. The closing of that pocket, the interior penetration, and then the pressures late. Javon Bullard ends with 2 sacks on the day, and you know it's going to be a good one because Georgia was able to put their defensive backs in challenging one-on-one situations. They held up well, and the front end came away with their side of that bargain, which is you're not going to have to be back there alone for long. And when you do that, when you bring pressure or you isolate your defensive backs, they're okay with that agreement as long as you're affecting that passer. And that quarterback can't just sit back there for 3-4 seconds at a time and peruse the field and come across and let them make a couple. That can't happen. So that Georgia defense, from the front end to the back, played a game that, again, that goes back to here's the game plan, but we've got to honor and respect what our roles are. And I think across the board they were able to execute that about as well as you could ask.
John, great stuff. Thanks for being here today. We'll look forward to hearing a lot more from you coming up very soon there at on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Hope you have a great week. We'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Hey, it's going to be a great week for all dog fans. How about it? Go Dogs.
No doubt about that, John. Great stuff. Thanks so much.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Hey, can we actually do this? Can we kill that music just for a second? I want to come back to that in a minute. We'll get back to that here coming up in just 1 second. But obviously good stuff there with John Stinchcomb, and glad to have him on the program. We'll get to our SEC Through and do that in a quick second. Before that, though, I do want to give a quick shout-out to, we talk a lot about injuries, things like that going on at UGA. Obviously, I've been watching in our comment sections. The show has been kind of rolling on. A lot of folks wondering, hey, what's Robert Beal's future going to be? And, hopefully getting an update from that on Kirby Smart here later on today. So, obviously, health and, physical condition, very important when you think about Georgia football players. And it's important in your own life there as well, taking care of your own kind of bumps and bruises and the injuries that you might happen and the things that go on with all of that. Well, that's where I want you to kind of get acquainted with our friends at Peachtree Orthopedics, because they've been Atlanta's go-to orthopedic group for more than 70 years here. And they've got leading physicians, specialists for every part of your body, and a great process for helping you get better. And here's how it's going to kind of work out. This is the process they're going to put in place for you and have been doing now for more than 70 years. They're going to listen, understand your problem. They're going to make sure that all your options are fully explained to you, so you don't have any kind of fear going into a situation like this. And they're going to make a plan for your recovery so you can get back to doing whatever it is you enjoy doing in life, playing golf or running marathons or whatever your thing is. They can get you back in the game here really quick. So now with the Urgent Ortho Clinic, they're going to make it even easier for you, because they offer same day, evening, got some Saturday hours, convenient for you to kind of get in there and get what you need seen about and kind of get back and doing the stuff that you love doing even faster and with less cost to you. So life is waiting. Time for you to get better. And our friends at Peachtree Orthopedics want you to be able to do that. So find them online at peachtreeorthopedics.com. peachtreeorthopedics.com. And you can check them out today. So check them out. Great to have them as a part of DawgNation Daily here today. And now we'll roll into our SEC Through.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, good stuff with John Stinchcomb there. And, yeah, as I mentioned just a moment ago, there will be a lot of curiosity. I'm speaking to you here live just before 11 a.m. Kirby Smart will speak with his press conference around noon. And one of the big questions will be the health status of Robert Beal. When Kirby spoke during the post-game press conference on Saturday, obviously didn't have any kind of update to offer on Beal there at the time, but finding out more about the injury that took him away from the team and off the field there, kind of stepping in place of the already injured Nolan Smith. Beal's injury going to be key information to know, and obviously we're not doing a ton of this today, of course, but if you want to go back before the season began, hey, what's the toughest stretch for Georgia this season? Most of us said, back-to-back road games in November, Mississippi State, then Kentucky. Well, that stretch is now here. And for all the attention the Tennessee game has gotten, and rightly so, an unforgettable night in Sanford Stadium when it was all said and done, and, by ranking the biggest game to ever take place in the stadium. Well, the job, and you see this so frequently in the SEC, you got to dust yourself off and get back to business here. And for Georgia, that means going on the road in back-to-back weeks. We talk about go for 2 in 22 around here. Well, go for 2 takes on a little bit different meaning here over the course of the next couple of weeks. It's go for 2 on the road. First Starkville, then Lexington. But that's the business at hand here for the Georgia Bulldogs. 2 big road games to kind of handle here. So as the week goes on, you better believe we're going to be getting heavily into how you get back to it. How do you get that game face focus? Chance to clinch the division coming up here. We're going to get into all of that here before it is done. And it's going to be a busy week heading towards Starkville here in our program. But also we're thinking about cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean there as well. And, of course, great chance for you to be a part of what was so much fun a year ago. It kind of turned into a national championship celebration. Admittedly, we didn't know it was going to be that way when we planned our first ever cruise with DawgNation. That's what it turned out to be. Well, now you have a little bit more forethought that, maybe go for 2 in 22. We have a chance to do all of this all over again, and we already have such a huge response. I can't believe how big this DawgNation cruise is getting already. Magnitudes larger in terms of the staterooms that have been booked, already magnitudes larger than last time was. Last time was one of the most fun things we've ever done for me in the history of DawgNation, and yet by the size and scope alone, this year's DawgNation cruise is going to be so much bigger, and there is still time for you to be a part of it there as well. In fact, I talked to 3 different people on Saturday in Athens who were like, BA, I'm going to see you on that DawgNation cruise. I'm going to be there. So we're already hearing from so many folks who are going to be a part of this, and that's just great to hear. And if you want to be a part of it yourself, you can go to royaldogs.com. That is royaldogs.com, and find out more about the specifics of the event. The great stuff to do on board Independence of the Seas this upcoming April, but in addition to that, the terrific array of special DawgNation-only events. They're a part of that there as well. You can check all of that out, royaldogs.com. It's a website specially made by our friend Jessica Slater, who's a terrific travel agent and the one that Royal Caribbean trusts to help us book this great Royal Caribbean cruise vacation for all of you who are going to be a part of it. So you can call Jessica as well, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. And as I'm telling you all of this, you're also seeing some video, at least if you're watching on video, of the upcoming Icon of the Seas. New standard of the cruise industry when Icon debuts January of 2024, and you're going to be able to see all of that coming up really soon and having a great time with us on the DawgNation cruise there as well. All right, let's go cruise around the SEC now, and let's talk about a couple of things. And I think it's fair to say this, and this may sound a little bit weird, so let me make sure I say it correctly, and I guess make sure you hear what I'm saying and don't hear what I'm not saying. I think the most significant thing to happen on Saturday may not have been Georgia winning. It may have been Alabama losing. And I'm going to say this from the perspective of history here. I mean, after all, no matter what anonymous coach moron may have said to ESPN.com or what, talking head on TV may have said, Georgia still was more than a touchdown favorite. It was expected to win. But Alabama was a 2-touchdown favorite going to LSU, and Alabama proved, I think once and for all now, they've lost twice. They could have lost far more than that Alabama is just not the same Alabama for this year right now. Now, do they get that back at some point in time? Maybe they do, but you do have to question how easily is that going to be done here over the course of this offseason. This is not a national championship level football team. This is not a playoff level football team right now. Alabama has regressed. When Alabama lost to Tennessee a couple of weeks ago, what I told you was, I said the Alabama era is over. Now, I acknowledged at the time that did not mean I didn't think Alabama could win the national championship this season. There was a chance they could have dusted off that road loss to Tennessee and still come back and win the national championship. We now know that's not going to happen, but when I said the Alabama era is over a couple of weeks ago, that wasn't the same thing as the Alabama dynasty is done. That's not the same thing. A lot of folks have kind of gone down that path and been proven wrong in the past. But the Alabama era to me was, and you've heard me say this before, it was across-the-board dominance in all phases. Best offense, best defense, best coaching staff, best recruits, best. Alabama had kind of defined itself by this overwhelming excellence in every phase. And it's pretty obvious when you've watched them play here lately. They don't quite have that anymore. And now we know after the LSU loss, they have even less of that than we imagined. That Nick Saban has tried to evolve with the times, but he has evolved in such a way that's weakened Alabama. Nick Saban, over the course of the late stage of his career, has delegated a lot of authority, and in doing so has made Alabama into something different than it once was. The Alabama team of the Kirby Smart days, when Smart, left there after the 2015 season, this was a team that had physical toughness. This was a team that had that competitive edge. This is a team that wanted to strike you on both sides of the ball. And Alabama has become, as you well know, and you've heard me say before, much more of a finesse-oriented football team. And they've gotten worse in that process. And Nick Saban has patted himself in the back and celebrated all the ways in which that he's kind of evolved with the times. You've heard him say many times, and I think a lot of this was directed as a shot towards his former protege, Kirby Smart, that you're not going to win anything, we've heard Nick Saban say, playing defense, running the football the way that football used to be, the kind of football that Nick Saban, once embraced. He made a big show out of no longer embracing that and kind of showing you how willing he was to kind of get with the times. And yet, I think successful people change their mind slowly. And I think in retrospect, Nick Saban just simply changed his mind too quickly. And he evolved too much in a direction that opened the door for Kirby Smart to maintain some of what has defined football for decades. Kirby Smart was able to maintain some of that while Alabama willingly let go of it all. And the path that allowed Georgia to win a national championship so quickly, I think part of the story for why that happened is because Alabama opened the door for it to take place by simply becoming something they didn't used to be. I don't fully understand why this is, but everybody who embraces the, score 50 points per game on the offensive side of the stuff, on that offensive side, every team that fully embraces that suffers in other places. They become worse defensively. Ohio State had the same thing happen to them. They're trying to correct that this year with Jim Knowles as the defensive coordinator, and they seem to be taking some steps towards doing that. But pretty clearly they know they were too finesse-oriented for a while. Now Alabama kind of is that as well. And when you don't have great wide receivers, this year Alabama doesn't, all of a sudden you don't really have kind of any identity whatsoever. This is kind of a failed program here right now, at least in terms of the way in which you typically define Alabama in terms of winning a national championship. And there's a lot of soul searching in Tuscaloosa that's going to have to take place. And you know what? As a program, they may still be good enough that they fix it here over the course of the offseason and they come back next year and they're just as good as ever. You have to consider that's still a possibility. But something right now is broken, and it's not an easy fix. In fact, seeking easy fixes may be one of the things that's kind of gotten Alabama in trouble. All of the transfers they took in, once again, another example of Nick Saban kind of rushing to embrace some newfangled idea only to find out that there just isn't quite the easy fix that's out there. Does Alabama have the same culture in place that it used to have? I think it's safe to say that it doesn't. And when you've got a wide receiver from Georgia and a running back from Georgia Tech and another receiver from Louisville and an offensive lineman from Vanderbilt and all the huge level of transfers they took in, every time you bring in a bunch of faces from other places, your culture is going to be watered down just a bit. I think the Alabama culture has simply been watered down too much. So when we look back on this particular weekend, obviously Georgia fans will remember it fondly for how fun it was to be a part of the big win against Tennessee, but at least on the virtue of point spreads, the win against Tennessee was expected to happen. Alabama was not expected to lose at LSU on Saturday, and they lost again. They've lost twice now, could have lost far more than that. Alabama has slipped, and there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done there in Tuscaloosa to find out if they can even get back to the perch they were once on. We'll have to see how all that plays out. On the LSU side of this, all of a sudden for a Georgia fan, you now are completely confronting a different reality than you thought you would. If Georgia can clinch the East, beat Mississippi State and do that, then all of a sudden you have a very likely chance of looking across the field and seeing a team in Atlanta in December you didn't expect to see. Brian Kelly, year one, has a chance to lead LSU to an SEC West championship, sort of a division win, an SEC championship berth, and you do have to give him some credit for that. These are the kinds of wins he didn't really get when he was at LSU, and I frankly didn't expect him to get that on Saturday. But he seems to be figuring some stuff out over there. And listen, I think that if this is the SEC West winner, which right now sort of seems like it will be, I'd say that on paper this is probably the worst SEC West winner in a good number of years. I don't know how far you have to go back in the past to find a softer SEC West winner than this LSU team would be by appearances. But nonetheless, you do have to give Brian Kelly a lot of credit here, and you do have to look at the very real possibility that it's going to be Georgia LSU, if Georgia can obviously take care of its business, but Georgia LSU in the SEC championship game, and that is not something that really anybody would have said here at the beginning of the season. And then I guess finally we'll kind of quickly get to this, which is ugly bad loss for Clemson against Notre Dame on Saturday. To go along with the Alabama loss there too. Obviously, Ohio State kind of scuffled around with Northwestern. That was kind of somewhat contributed by the weather. But boy, I mean, you're left to wonder now as Clemson, I'm assuming here, is going to miss the playoff for a second consecutive year. You have to start to wonder, do they get that back? I believe I'm right about this. Of the teams that have been in multiple playoffs, I think, Georgia is the one that had the longest drought between appearances. I think it was 4 years between 17 and 2021. But for the most part, teams that make multiple playoff appearances kind of do them in clusters a little bit. And for a Clemson team now missing the playoff for a second consecutive year, if that's what this leads to, which I believe, just given the fact they don't really have many wins to argue for them right now, that the Notre Dame loss might be fatal to the Clemson playoff chances. This is a team that seems far different than certainly the team that won a national championship in 2018, and a team that's kind of a playoff fixture even in years after that. This seems to be like a very different Clemson team right now. You kind of wonder, is it kind of a changing of a guard in that regard? Is Clemson kind of stepping back from its perennial playoff contending status right now? It feels like there's a lot of change in the air in terms of what the pecking order has been, and that we see definitely a little bit of a sea change going on here, where Georgia obviously, by appearances from Saturday, is kind of rising to sort of an ascendant stage, and teams like Alabama and teams like Clemson are going the other direction. This is a very interesting time to be a college football fan, and if you're a Georgia fan, obviously you love the idea of this continuing for as long as it can, because Georgia's perch atop college football is more unquestioned right now than it has been at any point in time in this season. But bad day for Clemson on Saturday, bad day for Alabama. All of this very, very fascinating to see, and we'll see how the playoff selection committee discusses all this when it airs its show on Tuesday night. But pretty clearly there's going to be a very different-looking ranking situation on Tuesday than there was last week. We'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And one thing I want to point your attention to around here is if you go to DawgNation.com, right at the top of the page, you hear us say all the time, go for 2 and 22. Well, guess what we have for you right now? You can tell the world that's exactly what Georgia wants to do. Clemson, sorry you lost Notre Dame. Alabama, sorry you lost again. For everybody who's kind of dealing with all of that, you can tell them sorry. At Georgia, we don't know what that feels like. At Georgia right now, it's all about go for 2 and 22. And click the link at the top of the page at DawgNation.com. You can get your own Go for 2 in 22 t-shirt, the same image you see on the front of my desk each and every day. You get a chance to have that for yourself there as well. Our DawgNation store, which is DawgNation.store, that's its own URL. But the easiest way to do this, click the link at the top of the page at DawgNation.com. Get your own Go for 2 in 22 t-shirt. Time to make the push. That's what Saturday was all about. And it's fun to see those T-shirts all over the place here coming up very, very soon. And by the way, speaking of our golden shoe winners, as you might imagine, we have a lot of these in the days ahead. Looking back on this game against Tennessee, and we'll do some fun ones here right now, including Joshua Campbell, who gives you the hashtag Go for 2 and 22 on the message that he sends. And I saw this meme a good bit this week where like the Grim Reaper is Tennessee, sort of knocking on every door, LSU and Alabama and Kentucky, and then on the Georgia side, the dog slams open that door and says, "Who's there?" squashing the Grim Reaper. This was a great image. Joshua Campbell, thanks for sharing that with me. We'll make you a golden shoe winner today, especially since you used the hashtag Go for 2 and 22, which we love to see. Another golden shoe winner there as well, going to Dublin Dog, who says this needs to be a golden shoe. And what do you see? Smokey the Blue Tick Hound. He has been muzzled by the Georgia Bulldogs. That's exactly right. There's only room for one dog in the SEC, and it's not Bully in Starkville, and it's not Reveille in College Station, and it sure as heck ain't Smokey up there in Knoxville. It is UGA. And on Saturday, Smokey got put in his place. So good stuff, Dublin Dog, and Keith Pitts, by the way, too, who I guess made the graphic. Really good to both of you there as well. And, of course, now that one orange team has been dispatched, it's time to think about the other orange team, or at least one of those orange rivals that Georgia has. 355 days from right now, Dogs back in Jacksonville, beating up on Florida again. We don't forget about that around here. That is our Gator Hater Countdown. Go for 2 in 22. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And on video. Time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. And guess what? That's exactly what Georgia fans did on Saturday there as well. They showed up on time, which for them meant very, very early. And the Georgia Bulldogs took care of business just like they promised they would. What a great day for sure. All right, so let's get your comments here across all platforms, and we'll just kind of bask in the glow of all this here. James Crum says, you didn't hear Smokey. Let me get this. He says, Smokey is transferring to Georgia, but he has to stay on the outside because UGA is the only one who has a house. That's good, James. I like that. That's really good. Let's see what else. Bill Sanders says, now the real show can begin. Folks enjoy having their comments read. So, Bill, I'm glad you enjoy that. Caleb Janney says, I told you it was going to happen. I got a few of the details wrong, but we did have an interception. We did jump up by 18 instead of 17. Also, can we just say that Ladd is back? Yeah, you better believe he's back. Back in a big way. Big way. You know, a lot of folks in here talking about some of the guys that kind of, you know, left this program. And, yeah, listen, you know, the grass is not always greener. Now, Georgia didn't have a ton of transfers leave the program, but the ones that did, you know, maybe they are regretting themselves right now a little bit. Gerald Harmon says, no offense to the Golden Shoes, but my replica ring should have gotten a Golden Shoe Award. Gerald, did you send that to me? Did I miss that? Because I have to say that I'm in the midst of kind of sifting through some stuff. So if you sent that to me and I haven't used it yet, I apologize. Let's see what else. Ken Feinberg says, energy is a real thing, and I was sending it on Saturday. Ken, I'm glad to know that. Sandy Price said, my local TV station made the comment this morning that Saturday's game is now the loudest game in college football history. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with Kirby on the fact that I'm never quite so sure how accurate those like decibel reading things really are. But in terms of what it sounded like to my ears, I'm just telling you right now, I don't remember moments, and I've been everywhere. Obviously, Athens a million times, other places there too. I don't remember moments where it sounded louder to me anywhere than that. Now, loud is, of course, loud, and once it's too loud to hear, anything louder than that's probably just window dressing. But I don't ever remember being anywhere that I thought was louder than that. Obviously, it's going to be called the loudest Georgia crowd of all time, and I think rightly so. But you know, I'm straining to find out, you know, games that I've been to where anything was louder. And I've been to some loud places, you know, like Auburn in 2017. To their credit, very loud. I was in, you know, been in Knoxville many times before. That's been loud before. You know, near the end against LSU in 2018, that got pretty loud. But I've never felt anything that felt quite like what you felt on Saturday. I haven't. Let's see what else. John Benton said that hashtag could go on for a while. John, boy, that'd be great. Wade Walford said Malachi Starks repaid his debt to Kirby Smart in full on Saturday against the Vols. You love that. Eric DeVorncy says, hopefully we can meet up in Starkville. Eric, I would love that. I'd love that. Travis Ed, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. Thank you, Travis. Jamie Huff on the throw to Marcus Rosemy Jackson by Stetson Bennett says it was big time. Jamie, you better believe it was. It absolutely was. Kent Holcomb also mentioning, I guess, the fact that the Tennessee folks got Bennett's phone number. And listen, the stuff that he was doing related to that was really something to see. Like, obviously on the one touchdown he had, and, you know, Tim Tebow did the same thing years ago. Remember, I think it was against LSU, where he kind of did the same thing. It's amazing how reminiscent this was of that Tebow moment. Yeah, there's the photo. By the way, great job capturing that image. I think that was one of the Georgia photographers that got that, I think. Great job capturing that image. And I'm telling you, like the same thing happened to Tebow with LSU. It's amazing how similar this is. But that's, I believe, after the rushing touchdown. But after the throw to McConkey, like I saw this. I mean, Bennett turned his back, looked straight over that like pocket of like Tennessee. I guess there'd be like students that were kind of in the lower level, the 100 level, and he pointed straight to him, gave him the phone thing again. I mean, he was he was in another level on Saturday. Another level on Saturday, which was great. Let's see what else. Let's go to YouTube here. Antonio Jones says the mailman's making phone calls. Oh, yeah, by the way, somebody sent me a great one. I want to do this eventually of Stetson Bennett delivering as the mailman delivering an L to Tennessee, which is really funny. Scott Boland said, any thoughts on Kirby's mention of not taking one in the portal during the post-game TV interview? Yeah, I mean, we are going to talk about that at some point in time, I think, because, I mean, first of all, Georgia would have certainly been open to taking people out of the portal. I just don't know there was a lot of Georgia-level players that actually entered the portal. I mean, I think that's important to note is that I think that Georgia would not have minded of having a portal player, but it's not going to build its team in the portal the way that Alabama seemed content to do. It's just not going to do that. It's just not going to do that. It's, because there is no free lunch. And, when I say stuff like that, people think that I'm, whatever, I guess. But when Alabama was taking all these portal guys, we said, hey, it's not as simple as saying just go get a bunch of rent-a-players and roll the ball out there and go out and win games, that there is something to team chemistry. I mean, how much did Kirby and them spend all of last year talking about, the connection the players have with each other in those skull sessions where they got to know each other better and learn to play with each other and in some cases play for each other. That was a big part of this. And if you're, basically bringing in a bunch of soldiers of fortune, untrained, kind of these mercenaries to come in here, like there's just, that's not going to be the simple fix that you think it is. And so, I do think that's important to note. And listen, everybody made a big deal about the practice video, the audio leaked from Kirby, where he was, obviously coaching very hard leading up to this game. And yet somehow that's just kind of a part of it. Where at Georgia, you are asked to do something hard and you are going to have demands on you to play at an excellent level, to practice and perform there at an excellent level. And yet somehow people willingly want to be a part of that because I think they feel like they're going to be made better for having gone through it. And it is special to see that. And as a fan, you got to enjoy every minute of it because here's what you see happening in Alabama right now. It may very well be over. And if it is, what an unbelievable run from 2008, second year for Saban when they kind of won the West for the first time, all the way until now. I mean, this is an unprecedented run of success. But even with that unprecedented run, it's not like it lasted a million years. It lasted, 14 or so years? If it is indeed over, and maybe it's not. But let's say, just for the sake of conversation, it is. That means that at some point in time, what Georgia's enjoying right now, it's going to end too. That once you kind of lose that grip on what you have, and hopefully it's 20 years from now, but eventually that kind of grip that Georgia seems to have on what it's doing right now, one day it'll slip a little bit too because everything eventually does. So enjoy what you're seeing right now. Enjoy the way in which these players are playing for and with each other right now. And enjoy the way in which they're willing to embrace the challenge of doing what is hard and being better for it because, these are the kinds of moments that just, they're not guaranteed in life. And, we're lucky all to be right now and healthy and alive at a time in which this is happening for the team that we've cheered for. It's just really important to kind of soak up every single moment of it. It really is. Let us see what else. Bubby Dean says the Vols are blaming the loss on the rain. They didn't get a touchdown. He says they didn't get a touchdown until basically after it started raining. I mean, it's so true. Tennessee had been completely and thoroughly dominated, and I think it's probably true that that when it started raining, Georgia decided to pack it in offensively and enjoy the lead that it had. But that's what you get to do when you take care of your business, is that you do get to, Georgia jumped up, established the lead, and then had the luxury of being able to play the game they wanted to play, including at the end of the first half when Kirby pretty clearly was playing for the last shot. Didn't love that play call on that final throw before the field goal. I'd like to see something on the short side of the field a little bit more. Right there. I thought it was kind of a low percentage throw, but nonetheless, I didn't have a problem with Georgia playing for the last shot right there because that's the luxury you have when you've built the lead and you are keeping the Tennessee offense at bay, something we knew that Georgia wanted to do some of on this particular day. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure Tennessee fans are going to sound a lot like Bo Nix. Bo Nix will have you believe that 49-3 somehow didn't count. That wasn't the real Oregon team. The real Oregon team would be whatever plays Georgia in a rematch. That's the real Oregon team. The 49-3, that doesn't count. I'm sure there'll be plenty of Tennessee fans who are echoing some sort of sentiment of, oh, you may have gotten us this time, but what happens when the rematch? I don't know. We'll find out. Maybe. But frankly, Georgia doesn't have to worry about that right now because Georgia's won the game that's been played. So, yeah. Let's see what else. Andrew Hughes says you can't spell volunteer without an L, and you can't spell roll tide without two L's, which is very funny. Very funny. Taiwan Taylor says Tennessee fans with the excuses. I remember being in that position when Mark was the coach, but not anymore, though. It's good to be a dog. Yeah. I mean, listen, throughout a lot of our lives, a lot of different eras of Georgia football, you were left to kind of, take comfort in woulda, coulda, shouldas. And, I mean, I'm telling you, it's just one of the most satisfying experiences I've ever had, knowing that on a day when, listen, I wasn't in a very good mood on Saturday. I was a little bit tired of some of the things I was hearing about Georgia. But it felt so satisfying to know that Georgia has the kind of team that can go out and take care of business in a situation like that. That Georgia really is the kind of team that can go out there and, show people exactly what it's all about in a situation like that. I think that's great. Let's Go Brandon says, we all please refer to the upcoming game as the Dog Eat Dog Bowl, which is very funny. Very funny. Let's see what else. Julian Harris, this is actually a really good idea. In like baseball, every time the pitcher gets a strikeout, you kind of hang the K. He says Georgia should be like hanging some sort of symbol every time you get a false start. I wonder if you hang like the yellow flags. That's actually a really good idea. The same, this has been kind of thing that now teams going to do this in sort of an official way, but it used to be unofficially that you'd kind of hang the flag for every K that got done. I like the idea of that. Every false start, every penalty like that, kind of hang some sort of yellow flag or something like that. That's a really good idea. Really good idea, Julian. I like that a lot. Very good idea. Andrew Hughes says, do you think Georgia would use the black jerseys against Tech? I mean, I wouldn't mind it for sure, especially if you actually finally get a night game here in Sanford Stadium. That'd be really nice. That'd be really nice. Biscuit likes that idea too. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. Let's see what else. Emperor says we're running it back like the movie Tenet. I like that. Zebulon Owen on the subject of Stetson Bennett. You love that. Big Dog Brett says Call Me would be a great T-shirt. Yeah, for Stetson Bennett. That's not too bad. I like that too. Crow King 123 hoping that Tech game is going to be at night. Yeah, you and me both on that. You and me both on that. James F. says, today's my birthday. My daughter took her first steps on Saturday during the game. Boy, James, what an amazing time you're having. So much fun to see those first steps. Congratulations, and what a great birthday celebration there, too. Great couple of days for you and your household, James. That's awesome. Congratulations on that for sure. Let's see what else. Cousin Casey brings up an interesting point. What if the playoffs for Georgia was a rematch against both Oregon and Tennessee? I mean, I do think Tennessee's still alive here for the playoffs. I think you have to say that they are. I mean, it was a thorough beatdown for Georgia, but, given the fact that you got to find four teams from somewhere, certainly Tennessee, if it is 11-1, if its only loss is to the number one team, defending national champs in its own stadium, I don't think the Vols have much to apologize for Saturday. I mean, they were thoroughly beaten down, but you're not comparing them right now to Georgia. You're comparing them right now to the other teams that might make the playoff. And I think that Tennessee would have a decent argument, so it is possible that could be a potential rematch situation. And in the case of Oregon, I mean, if they keep doing what they're doing right now, they do look really good. That could be a possible rematch situation. What's crazy about that is, remember, you can't lose sight of this, is that this year's playoff is one of those situations where you've got a semifinal game in Atlanta and you've got another semifinal game in Arizona. So this year it's not just about making the playoff. It is about that seeding situation where if you're Georgia, even though with a couple of other, more regular season wins, you could probably almost guarantee yourself a playoff spot, kind of like last year was. But this year, you want to go all the way, and you want to be 13-0 because you want to play in Atlanta. You don't want to play in Arizona and then play the national championship game in Los Angeles. That's just a tough travel schedule for a college team. Even if you stay out west for a couple of weeks, that's still a really tough travel schedule for a college team. It's not like the NFL. NFL teams going to stay on the road for 2 weeks, pretty frequently. That's not something that college teams do with regularity. That would not be easy. It would not be easy to keep the focus, for that couple of weeks with that much travel. I can tell you right now, having been in the locker room after the Rose Bowl in 2017, Kirby was very, very edgy about the long travel situation coming back from California, knowing the national championship that particular year was only 1 week away. So travel is a factor when it comes to college football playoff because you play a lot further away from home oftentimes than you're typically used to. So if Georgia could play a semifinal game in its own backyard, that'd be a huge, huge luxury knowing that the national championship game is 3,000 miles from here in Los Angeles. And wouldn't it be funny after what Bo Nix said a couple of weeks ago, and you may be aware of this, that he believes that the Georgia-Oregon game would be different if it was played today? Well, he may get a chance to just show how different it would be. And a guy who's already lost 4 times in his career to Georgia, maybe he does get a chance to play him for a 5th time. And maybe Oregon gets to play Georgia once again in the same stadium they played them first time. Wouldn't that be funny? But it's all kind of a possibility. Elite GB checking out. Elite, thanks for being here. Emperor on the subject of Jalen Carter getting after Hendon Hooker. Yeah, it was really good to see. Buddy Lee Z also talking about those possibilities of playoff rematches. I think you have to consider that. I mean, I think that Tennessee still got to show that they're a playoff level defense. I don't know what their remaining schedule is. They may not really have a team that can test them, but like that's the one thing that. I mean, you'd like to have somebody ask this question eventually. People were asking, questions about Georgia's offense, despite the fact that it's, scoring 40-something points a game. Are people ever going to ask the question of the Tennessee defense of, can they really stop somebody when it matters? Because that's clearly a part of this. But I would say that they're right now still very much a legitimate playoff contender. And I would think that another team, as you said, that Georgia beat Oregon's kind of in that discussion too. Woodrow says we're the champs, don't have to rush the field. Yeah. Georgia just does not do that in games like this, for sure. Hemingway says, I got no problem with a blackout against hapless Georgia Tech. Yeah, can you imagine poor Georgia Tech here? If Georgia does get that night game, now it'll be the Saturday after Thanksgiving, so some of the atmosphere will be a little bit different because some students won't be there. But if Georgia finally gets that night game, Georgia fans are just going to be so happy to actually have a night game that, poor Georgia Tech's not going to know what hit it, unfortunately. And then, wear the black jerseys for that too, which would be really, really nice, really funny. Frank says, I don't like playing the same team twice. Yeah, it's obviously football is not a sport where you have that happen like the college level, and that happens all the time in the NFL level, but it does not happen a ton in the college level for sure. And last year you saw Georgia kind of be the beneficiary of that. Wayne Hunter says, I don't want another round with Tennessee. You see what happened to Alabama last year in the rematch with us. Yeah, I don't quite feel that way about this Tennessee team. Given the fact that if Georgia had to play Oregon and Tennessee again to win the national championship, I would dare say that's the easiest path to a national championship that anybody's ever had. Now, I'm not saying that I'm guaranteeing that Georgia's going to win those games. I'm not. But given what playoff teams have been in recent years, Trevor Lawrence, Clemson, some of these Ohio State teams, these Alabama teams, if Georgia rematch with Oregon, rematch with Tennessee for a national championship, given what the typical college football playoff team is, this would be about as easy a path in playoff you could ever hope for. And that's not trash talk. That's not whatever. I'm just saying, measuring those teams compared to what previous playoff teams have been, that's actually the path to the playoff you should want, because that's not the typical level of playoff team. Let us see what else. John Hendricks says, when was the last time we had a night game with Tech? So it was a night game in 2002, and that's one of the games Georgia won 52-7 or whatever. What other night games has Georgia had with Tech? It seems like they played at noon 8 million times. They've had a couple of night games in Atlanta. Night game in Athens against Georgia Tech. Have they had one since 2002? I'm sure they must have, but boy, memory's hard right now. Let's see what else. The man Raichia says that Bo Nix could win the Heisman. Yeah, he's in the conversation right now. He has to be. I think he threw for a touchdown, ran for a touchdown. Did he catch a touchdown on Saturday too? That's pretty crazy. Paul Moon says it was 2008 was a night game. I don't think that was a night game, was it? That's not my memory of that because I was doing a bunch of radio stuff back then. Ance McMahon says, I'd love for the Dogs to play Bo Picks again. Yeah, I mean, listen, if you get a chance to play Oregon in the college football playoff, understanding that, listen, anything can happen, and this is not me shooting my mouth off, things like that, but if you got a chance to play Oregon in the playoff, you should leap at that opportunity. You should leap at that opportunity. And with all due respect to Tennessee, who was clearly a very good football team, if that's who you played for like a national championship, I mean, you should leap at that opportunity compared to what the typical national championship game matchup might be. Absolutely. Like this year's Tennessee team compared to last year's Alabama team, I don't think there's much comparison there. Andrew Hughes says, you're talking about me doing play-by-play. Well, Andrew, I appreciate that. I do love doing it. It's a fun thing to be able to do, and you never know where the world might take you. You never know. But I appreciate you saying that, Andrew. Thank you. John Adams on Nolan Smith, I believe, is the Smith he's referencing. I don't believe we see Nolan again this year, unfortunately, which is very sad. I think it's basically official now. Nolan's not going to play the rest of the year. I love seeing him on Saturday, though. I saw him walk into the stadium, prior to the rest of the team, well before the dog walk, big smile on his face, and yeah, he did have the big, kind of cast style brace on the arm, but he's wearing the Stetson Bennett jersey. It was really nice to see. TJ Smith says, no way does a Tennessee team beat an Ohio State or an Oregon. Yeah, I mean, the showdown everyone's going to want to see is Georgia and Ohio State. And I do think Ohio State's really good. Now, do I think Ohio State's gotten too much attention at the expense of Georgia? I probably do. Do I think that Ohio State, this year's version of that team, is sort of very much a typical, playoff level, championship level type team, and that you could be in for a fight of your life to win a game like that? Yeah, I do. I really do. I think that Ohio State is better offensively. I don't think they are as good as some people seem to think they are. I think a lot of people, see the scores, don't watch the games. Ohio State has not always played perfectly this season, Northwestern game Saturday included. But Ohio State's at a totally different level, I believe, than Tennessee is, than Oregon is. We now know certainly than Alabama is. Like Ohio State, I believe, is a completely different level than that. Scott Pete says, but they haven't beaten Michigan yet, and last year they proved incapable of doing that. So Scott brings up a very fair point on that. Let's see what else. Brandon Griffin says Nolan's presence at the sideline was huge. Yeah, it really was. Huge presence there on that sideline. Andrew Hughes kind of also pointing that same thing too. Carter Evans says the referees gave Tennessee at least 5 points with the safety, the no call, and then the drive with a couple of bogus penalties that resulted in a field goal. I mean, I definitely know the safety was just, I believe, an erroneous call, a wrong call. Cousin Casey also mentioned the possibility that Michigan beats Ohio State. Certainly have to consider it a possibility for sure. You definitely do. Paul Moon says 2010 Georgia Tech game was at 7:45. That would make some sense. That was also a really bad game, too. Like, my memory of that game was just not a very good game. Frankly, two not very good teams. That's one of the worst Georgia Tech, and there have been some not so good ones, but that was probably one of the worst ones. That was a Georgia win that was not a particularly it was not a thing of beauty to watch, to be sure. Junior Baker, good to have Junior in here as always. Junior's a great guy. And talking about Nolan Smith, it showed for the Dogs. Yeah, listen, Nolan is an all-timer in my book. Derriere says, which is a funny name, says the clock management was outstanding. Honestly, I mean, it was, and there's some risk associated with that. When you play for the end like that, kind of a basketball version of playing for the last shot, you have some risk with that. But that was kind of, I mean, it showed to me a certain level of assertiveness for Georgia that it could do that, right? That it built the big lead and then kind of designed the game to take the air out of the Tennessee offense. And this is one of those things where, like I've said this about Oregon before, Bo Nix saying, oh, well, if we played again, it wouldn't be 49-3. And what I've kind of half kiddingly, half seriously said about that is, no, it wouldn't. It'd be 31-0. And it would be one of those games in which you longed for 49-3. Like that Georgia has a way of beating you by 17 points that makes you feel like it's 100 points. And I think that Saturday kind of was one of those things where, I mean, it's like sort of like, when you're fighting your son or something, you kind of hold your hand out and he's trying to like get to you and he can't can't swing at you just because you get the reach advantage. There was a little bit of that on Saturday where Georgia was moving the chains, efficient on third down, holding on to the football, not always resulting in a touchdown late in the game, but just preventing Tennessee from getting anything going. And then when Tennessee would finally get the football, Georgia was unrelenting on defense. And I would imagine that's a very deflating feeling. Tennessee only lost by however many points it lost by, 17 or so. But I'm sure to the average Vols fan, it felt like 47 points because it was just so obvious that they were outmatched. Christy says, I saw the video of this, that somebody stole something off Nolan's front porch. I did see the video of that. That kind of stuff makes you mad. Yeah, Christy, you're absolutely right about that. Buddy Lee Z says, who are you giving your game balls to on defense and offense? I guess my offensive game ball probably goes to McConkey because he had the touchdown. He also had a really key third down catch late in the game too, which is pretty important. He was the leading receiver on the day. So I'm probably going McConkey on offense. No disrespect to Stetson. I mean, Stet threw for 2, ran for 1, so maybe you should say it was Stetson. But I thought McConkey had a big day. And then defensively, boy, that gets tough. Part of me wants to say Javon Bullard. Part of me wants to say Bullard. Jalen Carter was huge. Ringo obviously had the pick. Yeah, that's tough. B.A. Scargan said, did you ever think you'd see an Alabama team that couldn't run the ball? I'm telling you, they're different. And they're not, and they are not different for the better. They are different for the worse. And I think some of us had sort of said we kind of saw this de-evolution occurring. And Thomas Dyson says, definitely Bullard. You may be right. Definitely Bullard, maybe. Paul Moon says the fact we're not even talking about how well Kamari Laster played is an indicator of how well he did play. And that is true. I mean, some of that stuff, when you're asked to kind of line up and do lockdown coverage all day like that, it's just really hard. And I thought he did an outstanding job. DMart42 also kind of echoing that there as well. Ryan Donnell asking about the Beal injury. Yeah, we talked about this during the show a little bit. Hopefully we get more from Kirby on that today. It's 11:34 now, so Kirby's 25 minutes from now. That may be among the first questions that Kirby was asked. He was asked about that on Saturday night, he didn't know at the time. He said they were taking him back for an x-ray, and that was the last he had heard at the moment. In the case of Mitchell, the next step you're hoping for AD is being back at practice and being kind of that full contributor at practice. And at that point, now you're starting to think about, okay, getting closer to being able to play. Thomas Van Senne says, how about Rosemy Jackson for an offensive MVP of the game? He's come up big a lot, and obviously the touchdown was a great catch too. You're right. Heath Williams talking about the future of the Georgia defense, and yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. I think they have a chance to really have. The defense they could have next couple of years is beyond insane. All right, final comments on the other platforms. We'll get ready to go. Greg Childer says Smith and Stark's the best safety duo in the country, and then Bullard as well with them. Yeah, I really like Javon Bullard. I really, really like him. There is something about him that's a little bit different than the typical defensive back. Obviously, he runs really well, and I think we had the sense that he'd probably be playing more at the star position than maybe Tyke would be against Tennessee, because I do think that Bullard runs better, I believe. But Bullard's also got a little bit of an edge to him. He's got a little bit of a toughness that sometimes you don't necessarily always think of defensive backs that way. Not that they're not tough, but Bullard kind of brings some of that to the table. He's a really valuable commodity for Georgia right now. He really is. And the safeties, you just can't say enough about Christopher Smith and Malachi Starks. I think on the season, in total, I think that Christopher Smith has kind of had a defensive MVP type season for Georgia. And obviously Malachi Starks is just, a star in the making. Matt Rukvina says we're at Hollywood Studios today. Good to see Matt having a great time. Always traveling around and seeing kinds of things. And Matt, I don't know if you're riding Rise of the Resistance for the first time, but for me, that's the greatest theme park attraction ever. I'm a big Star Wars fan. That Rise of the Resistance at Hollywood Studios it's just amazing. I mean, as a kid, I would have never imagined some sort of Star Wars attraction like that being possible. And this is not an ad for Disney. They got all the business they need. They don't need my ad here. But I'm just telling you, that Rise of the Resistance, if you like Star Wars, wow, that thing is so much fun. It's kind of hard to get on. The line's always really long, and you got to jump through a bunch of hoops to kind of get into the attraction. It breaks down a lot. But man, is that an amazing attraction at Hollywood Studios. That is Matt said we just did it. I hope you enjoyed it. I don't know if you're as big a Star Wars fan as I am, but if you're a big Star Wars fan, that thing is unbelievable. And by the way, thanks for checking in from the park there. That's really cool. I love my family. We go to Disney a pretty good bit. We just kind of like it. Just sort of a fun thing for us to do as a family. But that Rise of the Resistance, that's really cool. Brandon Griffin says UGA is not the new Bama. We are the new Georgia. I like that. John Green says any charter buses going to the game on Saturday. I don't know of any, but that would be kind of a good idea. Fred Gunn says that Hagrid's the ride at Islands of Adventure. He says it's the best. So I know the ride you're talking about. I'm not a big Harry Potter person, but I've heard the ride is amazing. I think that Disney right now is just sort of better for my kids. I have younger kids. I think some of the Universal stuff is sort of probably better for kids who are a little bit older than mine are. And plus, for whatever reason, my family, we just know more about the Disney movies. Like a lot of the Universal movies, I mean, obviously everybody's seen Jurassic Park, but like some of those movies, we just haven't seen a ton. Like my kids are not big Harry Potter fans for whatever reason. So we're not as into the Universal stuff, but I have heard that motorbike ride I've heard it's really, really good. Really good. Zach Adams, Ryan Walker talking about what Ohio State faced against Northwestern. And there were some very windy conditions. Like I heard from some people unrelated to football how windy it was in Illinois on Saturday. But that still was not a great performance for Ohio State. And I think that you got to be able to kind of allow both ideas to fester there. That Ohio State's performance was downgraded because of the weather, but they didn't necessarily respond in the weather as well as they could. And there have been a couple of moments this year where if you really kind of look under the hood on Ohio State, you have not seen perfect performances. You haven't. Brian Whitehead said Eric Ainge has taken his medicine for what happened, and we kind of knew it. I mean, listen, Ainge just wanted attention. That's all that was. I mean, he knew the Georgia crowd was going to be loud, and he knew he was kind of trolling them when he put that out there on social media. So that's all there is. Hugh Nash says, I'm bummed I didn't get the golden shoe. So I'm like super behind after the weekend, Hugh. So if you've sent me some good stuff, there's a chance I haven't maybe gotten to it yet. So I apologize. Give me a couple of days, and I promise we'll get it all out there. So don't think I'm ignoring you, and don't think I'm not trying to give it to you. Just a little bit overwhelmed here coming off the weekend. So hopefully we'll be able to do that. So give me a couple days, Hugh, and if I haven't given you the reward you deserve, then you can get all over me for that. Wayne Kirkland says Stetson's phone number is 867-5309, which, if you were of a certain age, is very funny to you. Oh, yeah, Barry Watkins, also a great reaction from Ben Watson on the SEC Network. That was really fun. That was great to see. All right, final comments, DawgNation.com. We got to go. Randy Hall on the subject of Devin Willock, who's obviously given Georgia a lot. I know they rotated some of the offensive line on Saturday, but Willock, I think he's given Georgia a good bit here this year. Yard Dog says, don't recall a single missed tackle. Yeah, there had been some chatter about this of, hey, you may not be able to, for a team like Tennessee, if you really just want to throw it that much and you're going to throw it that quick, then you're going to have a lot of completions, and that you may just be content to just try to make tackles and kind of force them to eventually make a mistake. And it seems like that's kind of what Georgia did a little bit. And that's one of the reasons why those false starts were so valuable too. It's like, it's not just 5 yards that you're losing. It's the fact that the play stops, and you can sub if you want to. You can set your defense. I mean, to me, that's what I kept seeing. I don't know if y'all were seeing the same thing. It's like the speed with which Tennessee plays. I mean, you're grinding that to a halt after a false start penalty. And I just kept noticing that it's not just that you're moving them back 5 yards, or sometimes it was consecutive false starts, which was moving them back 10 yards. It's the fact that now you're stopping the defense every time. But when they're kind of in that rhythm, a completion typically creates another completion. And when they're doing it that fast, there's just only so much you can do. They're just moving at a very, very quick pace. And so you got to make tackles, and you got to know that you're going to give up some yards, and you just got to bow your back when you get a chance to. And I thought that Georgia did that about as well as they possibly could. Frank said UGA golfers finished 1-2 in the Worldwide Technology Tournament. I did see that. Talked to Harris Ingham's father a little bit on Saturday too, having a nice tailgate and having a good time. So we telling them how much we love our dogs on tour around here. It's one of the great sources of pride that I have. I don't talk a ton about golf on the show, but I love the PGA Tour. I love, Russell Henley and all those guys that are, doing it there on tour. Just love to see that, and great source of pride. And so here in the wraparound season, seeing the dogs continue to have great success, that's really good, really good. Let's see what else. Anything else before we go? We got to get ready to go. JP on the subject of a 5.5-hour drive to Starkville. Not terribly far away. Not too hard to do that. And looking forward to doing that on Saturday. Actually, because nobody cares about my little plight in life, but because I do high school football on Friday, the night game really helps me right there. Really helps me. All right, we got to go. Thanks for being here. Great stuff. What a great day. And what a big week, because there's more to look at about what makes Georgia in a game like this. We'll do that. And we got to get ready. 2 big road games at Mississippi State on Saturday. Not an easy spot at all for UGA. Not easy at all. We had these games circled at the beginning of the year as the moments in which Georgia would be tested the most, and now it is here. So we're go for 2 in 22, and that next mission takes you on the road in the SEC. And when it comes to that, you can't take anything for granted. So we're talking about that a lot. By the way, check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, ajc.com there as well. Tomorrow is Election Day. Now, by this point in time, virtually seems like the entire state has already voted early. But nonetheless, Election Day tomorrow. So you can get a voter guide online, ajc.com on that. You can also listen to podcasts in the AJC, kind of educating you on the different candidates and kind of what you can vote on there in your particular area. Also, baseball's winter meetings coming up. Braves, you expect to have a very active presence this offseason, so you can find out more about that. And believe it or not, Thanksgiving now just 3 weeks away. So you can learn more about, what to do to get ready for Thanksgiving online, ajc.com there as well. Have a great day. Thanks to R.S. Andrews, making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust R.S. Andrews on that. Air conditioning units, hey, listen, mine was still working this weekend. In fact, we had to kick ours back on because it was hot. And thankfully, when I turned mine on, that cool air came flowing through those vents. If you don't have the same thing happening for you, well, our friends at R.S. Andrews can get your systems tuned back up to factory fresh specs. So find them online at rsandrews.com for a lot more on that. Have a great day. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then.